name is Paul Corio, and I'm the author of The Charge of the Devastators, a screenplay and forthcoming book which tells the true and largely untold story of the greatest naval carrier plane battle ever fought. A battle that pitted an underdog American force against a gargantuan invasion fleet with everything on the line. This underdog American force was the only thing standing between that massive fleet and the west coast of the United States of America. It was a do-or-die battle.
For the purpose of writing a screenplay, I spent years researching this subject and traveling across the country attending reunions and commemorations and interviewing as many veterans as I could find to get first-hand accounts of what it was like to be aboard the American ships and planes that fought in this epic Battle of Midway. I wanted to tell the entire story of the battle while focusing on the crucial and mostly overlooked role played by the men flying the most vulnerable planes of all that day, the Devastator torpedo bombers. What's going through the minds of those young aviators as they take off, knowing they had to win, yet knowing their chances of survival were next to nothing? What was it like for sailors and crew to watch the awesome spectacle of the carrier plane launches that day, knowing many of their buddies were taking off into eternity? What was it like to be in a Devastator squadron, alone, without escort, charging in at wave-top level, desperately trying to get to the enemy carriers as flak explodes everywhere and fighters swarm in? The screenplay that resulted from my extensive research answers all these questions. Virtually 100% of the combat sequences are based on first-hand accounts of the men who were there. No Hollywood embellishments needed, for these astounding but true stories of heroism, courage, and sacrifice are the likes of which an army of writers could never come up with. Many of these stories have never been made public, and with many of the men I've interviewed over the years having sadly passed on, there are some stories that only I can now tell, and that's where you can help. For even if I can't attain full funding through your contributions, if I can raise enough money to hire a named producer who can attach a name actor or director to the script, I'm convinced full funding can be attained for an epic, groundbreaking film about carrier plane warfare in the Pacific. In this film, you learn all about Lieutenant Commander John Waldron of Torpedo 8, who, after losing an argument with his superiors over the proper course to take to find the enemy, was then left with an excruciating decision. He could stick with the air group on what he thought would be a flight to nowhere, or he could risk court-martial, break from the group, and lead his 15 Devastators on the course his Sioux Indian instincts would take him, knowing that if his hunch was right, his squadron would charge in alone against the greatest armada ever to sail, meaning almost certain death to himself and the 29 beloved boys he trained up. You learn the unknown story of how his single decision set in motion an amazing sequence of events that led to the incredible American victory. Then there's Lloyd Childers, who after Pearl Harbor was hit, does all he can to get into his younger brother Wayne's squadron to fight alongside him, a move that placed him in the backseat of a death-trapped Devastator on that June 4th day, his 21st birthday. Wayne watches Lloyd give the Boxer's victory salute as his Devastator launches from Yorktown. Wayne will later survive dive bomber and torpedo attacks on Yorktown as he anxiously awaits his brother's return, wondering if a man can be born and die on the same day. Lance Massey commanded Childers' squadron. Married to a Navy widow who'd already lost a husband to a pre-war plane crash, Massey had 2 young sons who'd made him promise he'd return safely home from war, as he'd always done in peacetime deployments. Massey had let him barely survive the Navy's first airborne torpedo attack just 3 months prior, and he well knew that going up against the cream of the Japanese Navy gave him little chance of keeping his promise to his sons. Had these and many other heroes of Midway not fought as they did, who knows how many thousands more lives it would have cost to ultimately win the war, and how many millions of future descendants, you and I perhaps, would never have been born. We need to honor and pay tribute to these brave men to whom we owe so much.
All these men, their names should be household names, and that's what I want to do. We owe our freedom. Everybody watching this today, we owe our freedom to these men. I want to make their names household names, and you can help me do it. It's a great story. It needs to be told. So many of these veterans, there's so few of them left. Let's get the story told for them and for the men who went on before them, and for the men especially who sacrificed on that day. Help me tell this story. I appreciate it. Thanks.